Chapter 32. Seer roared as spiritus males stepped out of the docking bay doors on all sides of them. There were a dozen, not including Parsimon, but it didn't matter. All that mattered was Kaci. He leaped for her, but Parsimon jumped back, taking Kaci with him. A fist crashed into the side of Seer's head, the raw power making his head spin. A slight tickle of warm blood trickled down the height of his head, but he ignored it. His vision blurred, then returned. A concussion. He turned slightly to view the warrior who had delivered the coward's blow. The man's facial expression was one of nervousness. Seer glanced at the men who surrounded him, scrutinizing their strengths and weaknesses. All wore the reddish-tan vests of males trained in the war. But something was off. His eyes narrowed as he took in the strange, billowing quality of their uniforms. Instantly, he knew what it meant. These males could fight in shifted form, and they had uniforms for it. His pulse picked up. Only a handful of the population could do such a thing without losing complete control and becoming more of a liability than an asset. These males were dangerous. But then, so was he. His gaze returned to Parsimon and Kaci. His eyes narrowed as he waited. Whatever he had to give the coward to get her back, he would.
Seer.
Parsimon's voice was overly friendly.
Thank you for returning my bride to me.
Several of the warriors around him jerked at the mention of his name. Two stepped back. Seer clenched his fists. Good. Let them know that they faced one of the only living males who could enter battle frenzy. Let them know that even in shifted form he was stronger, faster, and able to take more damage than they could ever imagine. Let them realize that even against 10 shifted males, he would win a battle. And if my past is any indication, I can kill them all without hurting my Kaci. Seer's chest rose and fell as he fought to remain calm. His head felt strangely light, but he ignored the odd sensation, focusing instead on his mate. Kaci looked small and pale in the other male's grip. He needed to do whatever he had to in order to keep her safe. He would enter battle frenzy only if he had to. His primal side rippled beneath his flesh, demanding blood. Seer pushed it down. He didn't know what his Shadow Walker would do if released. His battle frenzy he understood. And what could the combination of the two do? A voice whispered at the back of his mind. This isn't the time to find out, he argued sternly. Be calm. I was taking the female to the medical bay. She is injured. And after the Bortrak attack, it was unwise to surround a warrior protecting a female. Then, he glanced pointedly at Leader and Gallant. And somehow, even after the Bortraks were dealt with, 2 of my friends were badly wounded. If they don't get medical attention soon...
They already appear dead to me.
Parsimon watched him too closely.
But if you feel they can still be saved, by all means, go.
Seer's eyes narrowed. Thank you. Kaci, come on then, we're off to the medical bay. His hand visible clenched her arm harder.
You seem to have taken a strong interest in my bride.
Give nothing away. You instructed me to make her my first priority. She has the rewire contagion, and was injured in the first docking. The words came out of him too quickly. He blinked, his vision wavering for a few unsettling seconds. Why do I feel so... strange?
I understand.
Parsimon's gaze ran over Kaci in a way that made Seer's stomach turn.
It seems you took your responsibility very seriously, even entering the debris field to bring my mate back to me. For that, I'm grateful.
Get her out of here fast, something isn't right. Now I must attend to her wounds. She still has a broken arm, and will need continued treatment for the contagion. Seer reached forward, but 2 males blocked his path. Now, peering between their shoulders, his gaze locked with Parsimon.
What is this?
An unexpected weakness came over Seer, and he had to fight to keep his knees from folding. Clenching his fists, he willed himself to remain strong. The male's dark eyes flashed with something.
As you know, this mission has had some complications. I intend to see to my bride's well-being from now on. We will be returning to my ship, where she will receive the finest of care. Congratulations, Seer. Your duty is done.
He plans to run before he has to face the council. That's unnecessary. We have the facilities here.
I have deemed it necessary, medic, and as I am your superior in all ways, you have no right to tell me otherwise.
Seer watched as Kaci struggled in Parsimon's grip, wincing as the male tightened his hold on her injured arm.
I won't go with you.
Every instinct within Seer roared to kill the male who had his hands on his mate. But even while his nails elongated and his skin tingled, he held himself still. The council is here. They have requested to meet with all of us. All pretense disappeared, and Parsimon's expression hardened.
Those useless bureaucrats are afraid to dock with us, even now. A rogue Bortrak might be alive. By the time they have gathered the courage to leave their ship, I will be long gone with my bride.
He paused, glancing at his warriors, then stepped closer and lowered his voice.
Be logical, Seer. You might have grown to care for this human, but is she worth your life? My warriors are the best, and you look as if you can barely stand. I have great respect for you, both your medical expertise and your former heroism on the battlefield. But this is a battle you can't win. Step aside, and I will let you live.
A ripple that raced beneath Seer's skin that was like nothing he'd felt before. Staring at Kaci, heartbreak and helplessness dancing in her deep blue eyes, something took over.
I can see what you're thinking,
Parsimon said.
But I have to warn you. The blow my warrior delivered to your head contained a controversial medication. You won't be able to enter your battle frenzy until it's left your bloodstream. In fact, as it works its way through your bloodstream, you'll experience a significant amount of pain and weakness.
Seer's gaze jerked to the male who had punched him. The warrior held up his hand. The ring he wore had a short, sharp injector on the end of it. It wasn't a concussion. It was the medication going into my brain. His pace picked up and he groped for his battle frenzy. He thought of Kaci, of them taking her. Anger and desperation boiled inside him, but when he reached for his gift, it was simply gone. No, this can't be happening. Not now.
Accept this, Seer. Don't fight it. There's nothing more you can do.
His primal side growled low within him, and he felt the hairs on his back stand on end. If what Parsimon said was true, soon his strength would be gone along with his battle frenzy. Already he could feel it fading in the shaking of his exhausted limbs. I will save her, no matter the cost. But what do I have left? A stillness came over him. And then the growl in the back of his mind became a roar. And he did something he'd never done before. He gave control to his primal side. He let go. Within him, his primal side roared again in satisfaction, growing and changing as it expanded. He felt his markings spreading. His back bent forward and he shuddered. His clothes ripped in pieces around his changing body, the tattered remains clinging strangely to his new form. Fire raced through his blood and his vision shifted to grays. His shadow walker stretched to life, like a thunderstorm within him. Giving into it was strange, yet natural, almost intoxicating. Just the power that filled his blood, strengthening his muscles and his bones, made him feel like a creature of legend. It was different than his battle frenzy. When he was young, a warrior had described the difference between battle frenzy and shifting. He was right. When he used his skill, he felt invincible. But in his shifted form, he felt the raw power of an animal. Soon he would know what this new form was capable of. A growl rumbled his chest, permeating from deep within him. Parsimon's eyes were wide, his markings pale.
What is this? He should be lying on the ground, not shifting.
But something was different than everything he'd been told, even by the shifter. I'm still able to think. Unlike most shadow walkers, he wasn't attacking like a beast driven only by instinct. He was waiting. None of them seemed to know what to do.
Can he still tap into his battle frenzy?
One warrior asked. pulling a blade from his vest. Parsimon took too long to answer.
No.
His men did not look convinced. Seer could smell the fear on all of them. He growled low in his throat, his lips pulled back from sharp teeth. Let them wonder what I'm capable of.
He's just a shifter, and so are all of you.
Parsimon barked, shoving one of his men forward.
There are a dozen of you. Take him out. Drain the life from his worthless body.
Seer!
Kaci shouted. She tried to run toward him, but Parsimon yanked her back. She cried out in pain. My mate! His primal side snarled. His vision flashed to red. Bam! Leaping onto the first warrior, he tore through his throat and let the body drop to the floor. Blades hissed as they were unsheathed from vests. His ears perked as he heard the other warriors start to shift. He caught the wrist of the closest guard and twisted. The male yelled out in pain and dropped his dagger, but then he finished shifting and swiped at Seer with his other hand. His claws slashed Seer's chest like shallow knives. Using his nails, Seer slashed back at his throat, and the male's yell faded away in a gurgle. Seer tore through the other warriors one by one, moving ever closer to Kaci, who was kicking and struggling in Parsimon's arms. It didn't matter if they had fully shifted. Seer's rage and desire for his mate made his Shadow Walker faster, stronger, and his ability to think gave him increased control. The remaining men leaped on him together, trying to use their numbers against him. Blades, claws, and teeth tore through his barely healed flesh, but he hardly felt the pain. He slashed, bit, fought like the primal animal that he had become. Nothing could stop him from reaching his mate.
I'll kill her.
Parsimon's threat was a cowardly whisper. Seer looked up and saw that more warriors were emerging from the ship behind Parsimon. He roared, but didn't move as the guards closed around him.
If you fight them, I will kill her here and now.
Parsimon promised, his lips drawing into a thin line. His Shadow Walker howled in desperation, but Seer held himself perfectly still. He didn't want to lose her. Didn't want to give her to a man who would hurt her. But he couldn't go on if his actions cost her her life. Will he really do it? He narrowed his eyes and examined Parsimon. The other man was trembling. His only concern was for his own life at this point. He would slit her throat and leave her here just to make his escape while she bled. He hung his head, even though his beast howled in denial. I will not fight. His promise was gravelly, the words of a half-beast.
Unfortunately, your word is just not enough for me. Given the situation, we both know you'll come after us.
The warriors struck while he was down, not giving him a chance to recover. The first blade struck him in the shoulder, and then there were more and more. In his back, in his side. His eyes caught Kaci's, the pain on her face agonizing. I love you, he mouthed.
You can't do this.
She screamed, beating and kicking at Parsimon, tears running down her face. But the other man easily held her.
He isn't fighting.
The 4 remaining men stabbed and stabbed. Hot blood leaked from his wounds, and his legs crumbled from under him. They pushed him down, in a pool of his own blood, and he watched as Parsimon tried to drag his crying mate into the ship. A hiss sounded behind him, and suddenly Parsimon dropped the knife with a shout. A blade impaled his hand. As if in slow motion, the knife at Kaci's throat tumbled to the ground.
What in the pregnant mother's name is going on?
The warriors around Seer stepped away, and suddenly 5 older males in white robes knelt down around him. One of them spoke, his voice somehow familiar.
Medic Seer.
Councilman Trustworthy.
We need a medic now.
The councilman shouted. Seer closed his eyes as a tear slipped down his cheeks. They had arrived just in time. No one could save his life now, but they could save hers.
Stay with us,
the old man said, his voice filled with panic.
It was him. He attacked me.
Parsimon's voice was filled with pain and panic.
He went into his battle frenzy. Kill him now, or he'll attack again. Better yet, let me take care of him.
No, he didn't.
Kaci screamed.
Parsimon is a murderer.
Seer's eyes cracked open, one last chance to see his mate, even as chilly numbness washed over his body. He watched the scene unfold as if he had already left his body far behind. Parsimon shoved past Kaci and headed toward him, to finish what he began. Suddenly, with a surprising strength and speed, Kaci bent down and grabbed the blade that had only moments before been at her throat. Jumping onto his back, she jammed it into Parsimon's throat.
Don't you ever touch him again.
He gurgled as she leaped away from him, his hands flailing about the hilt of the dagger. But she ignored him, rushing forward and throwing herself on top of Seer, grabbing one of the knives from his vest. She pointed it at his attackers.
Let him go. Get away from him.
But they had already backed away, looking between Parsimon, who was on his knees, and the council. She is safe now. He wanted to rise, to kiss her, to tell her that he loved her. I can shift. We could mate, make a family, grow old together. But he felt his heartbeat slow as the life drained from his body. His vision faded to black, even as Kaci shook him, begging him to stay with her. But death would not be stayed. She closed her icy fist around him, tugging him into the darkness of the afterlife.